Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Friday, November 3rd. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Rutgers game is tomorrow, the game against Michigan in 22 days. It is Friday, which means it is a Ross Fulton Day here on Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning. And when it is a Ross Fulton Day, we are sponsored by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse in Columbus, proudly offering nationally acclaimed USDA prime steaks, seafood and sushi, impeccable service, live entertainment, and an attention to detail that is simply unmatched. JeffRuby.com/Columbus. And you know, when we have Ross on here, his attention to detail, also simply unmatched. Today, we're talking about the defense, the number one, and we mentioned this on yesterday's show, the number one ranked in FBI, Ohio State defense. What a time to be alive. Ross, and this is a defense that has not been using a ton of blitzing. You haven't seen a ton of blitzing from Jim Knowles earlier in the season. It feels like he's starting to ratchet that up a little bit. First play we're talking about, Jordan Hancock coming off that corner and making a big play.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I would agree with that. It's both in terms of like he didn't show a ton early in the season, and it's been ramping up both in frequency, but also variety. And, you know, this game, like we talked about with versus Penn State, like they ended up playing a lot of single high coverages. This game was definitely more mixed. Like you saw quite a bit of quarter half from them. And, you know, which is cover 4 to the field and cover 2 to the boundary, which like Knowles is increasingly really liking with this group. Particularly when Denzel Burke is the cover 2 corner, and also some cover 4. But here you get a hot pressure, which you saw a couple of those. So you're bringing 6 guys, and then playing a 3 deep, 2 under zone behind it. Similar to, and like, so they brought both Hancock as the nickel, which like, interestingly, he played the entire game at nickel. And so like, you know, but we've talked about like he's physical enough, like as you can see here, like he can do it. Like sometimes he lines up as Sam and is like over a tight end and is fine in that role. And the Mike, and so you're like bringing the nickel in the C gap and the Mike in the B gap. And then what Knowles likes to do, like to that discussion, quarter half, like when he brings this, he does a hot pressure, but he cloud covers it. So like, again, like Denzel Burke squats in the flat. So you're really playing like you have like 2 under defenders, but one of them is a corner. And then you're just like keeping eyes on the quarterback, which is why it's called hot. But like, you know, they nicely, you know, pick up the crossing receiver. And, you know, so again, you're just seeing some more variety. Like he brought Latham Ransom a couple of times on the boundary safety blitz and like fire zoned with a 3 deep, 3 under behind it. So you're like getting more man pressures, you're getting more zone pressures. And just, you know, again, he's still picking and choosing the spots. Like, you know, there's times he'll come out on 1st and 10 on a rundown and like play a 3 high Tampa 2. So like sometimes it's like, oh, I'm not sure how much that call made sense there, but like he is keeping the variety up and like keeping opponents off balance.
One thing that they have done very consistently this year is they have been so good in short yardage. However frustrated Ohio State fans are with the offense in short yardage, the defense has just been so consistently good there. Next up, 3rd and 1 for Wisconsin, and they do not get a first down.
Yeah, and as we're going to talk about the next clip, like I'm really good on the goal line too. Like I feel like, you know, when in doubt, like they can always stop the run by playing cover 1 and bringing Josh Proctor down as a Sam linebacker and gapping it out. But like this one was kind of unique, which is why I grabbed it. And again, like we're talking about like increasing the variety. Like here they're actually playing what's called cover 4 Meg. We've talked about that in the past. And so Meg, that just means man. Meg stands for man everywhere he goes. So basically like the corners are manned up on the receivers. But that allows the safeties, like, so you're playing cover 4, so they're splitting the field, but they can trigger aggressively against the run. So it's an aggressive form of cover 4. You know, there's different types of cover 4. You can play it sort of safer, which they do. But this allowed both their safeties, you know, so Ransom and Proctor to trigger downhill. And, you know, Hancock, again, as the nickel sort of Sam, he handles like this is an RPO slide concept. So he takes that slide route in the flat and man, and then, you know, Ransom comes down and fills the C gap. And so, again, different ways of getting the safeties involved in the run game. And like, you know, to the cover 1 point, like when they get their safeties can be aggressive and physical, and they are happy to trigger down. And so I do think some of the times we've talked about, like, he's conservative because like he knows that's their strength. So in the back pocket, like you know you can do that. So you want to protect against like hey, we'll be more conservative because we can always know we can trigger downhill when we need to.
It's funny when we talk about the offense, and frequently opposing coaches, like Luke Fickell talked about this after the game, talked about the fact that, well, when you have a Travion Henderson, when you have a Marvin Harrison, like sometimes they just do stuff that other people can't. Like that's a real luxury to have that. I feel like we need to start having that conversation about JT Tuimoloau, because I think Penn State and Penn State fans talk about him that way. I don't know that you hear that as much from other fan bases and other coaching staffs, but man, there are certain situations where, you mentioned that goal line stand. We're going to be talking about that next. He is just unstoppable at times in those really, really big moments. How did he help blow up that Wisconsin first and goal, second goal at the one, whatever it was?
Yeah, I mean, I think friend of the pod, Space Coyote, mentioned this during the game, but I think there's this temptation to try to split block him, which have the tight end block back across the formation, because he comes so aggressively downhill. Maybe there's this hope that like he'll take himself out of the play essentially, and you just have to get a piece of him. But like I've seen too many times now where like opponents have tried to do that, and he just blows things up in the backfield, like split block, or like they'll pull the tackle on counter, and he just chases that guy and makes a play in the backfield. So again, you get that here. Like Wisconsin tries to split block him, and he just goes right past it. Like the tight end's not there. He obviously did that against Penn State too, against the pass, as we discussed the previous week. But like, so that's definitely playing with fire. I mean, the more, Knowles again, likes to have his particularly when he's playing the run, have his defensive ends crash down and spill the football outside. So you see that again here from both JT and Sawyer. And then again, like as we talked about, like Ohio State's really tough at the goal line because, they get in cover one, they put Proctor up as a Sam linebacker, and it's just they have every gap covered, and those guys trigger downhill really well.
So the last one, we're going to do this a little like yesterday's show, where you've gotten a lot of good news. We got to talk a little bit about, okay, well, where can you get better? Where can you improve? There was some weird stuff going on with the secondary during that game. There were some personnel choices. They were going to dime it sometimes, and there were points when it worked, and there were points when it didn't work. So let's take a look at that secondary personnel shifting around and the different stuff they were trying to do in the secondary. What was the thinking there, and why did it work, or why did it not work?
Yeah, I'm curious too, and we'll have to see what Jim Knowles has said about it, or will say about it. But as I said, they played Hancock the entire game at nickel, and so obviously that takes away the role. And I don't know whether maybe that's just a 1 week thing because of Wisconsin and their personnel, or maybe they just think Hancock's too valuable on the field after, how he's grown this year and what he did against Penn State. But that obviously then, that doesn't mean that if you did that and didn't change anything else, and Sonny Styles wouldn't be in the game. And so it seemed like they had him play some for Josh Proctor sporadically. I couldn't quite figure out a pattern to it. And then you kind of ended up, though, with some weird situations where, like, they've done a dime package before, which was like a 3-3-6 basically, and they had both the Styles, Proctor, Ransom, and Hancock all in together. But here you get more of they bring in Cam Martinez instead as the dime, and I guess it's like, well, if you're facing four wide receivers, you want two corners and two nickels essentially that are more like can play man coverage. Which is what they do here. They play a cover one. I just think that and they bring a 6-man pressure, and they Styles as the deep safety, and Proctor's not in the game. And, it's just kind of, it's kind of pushing it. Like Cam Martinez hasn't been playing. I mean, it didn't hurt him here. This was kind of like a high leverage situation where if they would have gone off the field here, like this drive eventually, like Wisconsin held the ball for the last 5 minutes of the second half. They obviously held them to a field goal, but would have been nice to get the ball back here and have another chance to score before the half. You also have Jermaine Matthews. You could theoretically try to play in this role, or you could just play both. I know Styles and Proctor and Ransom aren't quite the same as man coverage, but it gives you a little bit more variety. So it'd be interesting to see if they continue to do this going forward. It sort of, again, raises the question of, obviously this is a kind of a specialty dime package, but whether there's been sort of a change in thinking of how they want to handle certain personnel groupings going forward in the back end. And, we'll see when hopefully Latham Ransom comes back sooner rather than later. So it may negate some of that, at least for the next week or so, with Styles likely playing boundary safety in his place. But it'll still be something worth monitoring.
It doesn't feel like they're going to see, if this is something they were looking at in terms of facing a 4 wide receiver set, that doesn't seem like something they're going to see a ton of, at least for the rest of the regular season, though, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. Like even, like Michigan, even when they spread out, they usually keep one, if not 2 tight ends on the field. I mean, their tight ends are both pretty effective receiving threats. So yeah, it could be something specific to this situation and maybe just as a nothing. But I think it's emblematic of, again, like, for instance, like Michigan's a good example. Like, would they keep Jordan Hancock on the field the whole time for that game against 12 personnel at nickel? Or is this just like, again, a specific situation where, like, based on what Wisconsin did and, like, Phil Longo in the air raid, like, they had to sort of adjust to make sure guys got on the field for their snaps. And it maybe doesn't matter going forward, but certainly something I'm monitoring.
All right. Well, you want to talk football with Ross, get a little more detail on any of these questions, ask some follow-up questions. You can do that at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Our members have access to the Huddle Board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus. Get to talk to Ross, get to talk to all of our other smart scheme football folks. You can talk to them. You can talk to Tony and Kevin and I about the team. You can talk to Mark about recruiting, all happening at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And of course, thanks again to our friends at Jeff Ruby Steakhouse for sponsoring this podcast. Award-winning upscale steakhouse in downtown Columbus, named one of the top 50 steakhouses in America by Food Network. That sounds pretty good to me. You can make reservations and learn more at jeffruby.com/Columbus. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.